I'm telling you, it was him, Allie. Right down to the little black dot on the tip of his nose.
Wanted to take a moment to sit down and talk about Terrifier 2. Now, I know I already did a non-spoiler review of it, and I'm not going to do a spoiler review, though this may just function as a spoiler review for all intents and purposes. But I really wanted to make this a gush session about Terrifier, and I'll get into why, because I don't necessarily think it's like the best movie ever or anything like that, but it's certainly one of my favorites, and I want to kind of talk about why, because this movie is continuing to gain steam in the box offices. This was a movie that Terrifier 2 was only supposed to be out for like a weekend, like a 3-day span in select theaters. I live in a fairly big city, and there was no theaters in my city that were carrying the movie. I had to drive an hour over to the next city closest to me that did have a showing of it. And just the fact that a movie like Terrifier is in the theaters to begin with is essentially unheard of. It's completely unrated, so it doesn't have a PG-13 at all, not even close, not a rated R. Had it been submitted for a rating, it probably would have got like an NC-17 or something like that. Like, this movie, you never see a movie this brutal in a movie theater, and that's so unique. And now it's kind of getting into why that's unique, is getting into why I have so much love for this movie, and that it's a by your bootstraps indie DIY do it yourself project. This movie is grassroots from the beginning, completely independent. It has distribution through Bloody Disgusting, there's another Cinedyne, is that it? So it has distribution through a couple companies, but it's not like a movie theater release, right? Bloody Disgusting is not even a film company. I believe they're dabbling in films, but they're not predominantly a film company. They're just like a horror magazine, right? A horror website. So just the fact that there's no big studios involved in this at all. The guy who wrote it, directed it, Damien Leone, did all the special effects for it as well. Had this movie crowdfunded. This movie was funded through Indiegogo, I believe, right? Indiegogo, and it reached more than they were ever asking for, which is incredible. And that's all based off of the success of the first Terrifier film, which found its audience on Netflix. When it hit, it was just this independent horror film, right? There was no promotion around it. There's no hype around this film. It was just discovered on Netflix because they had this weird looking bloody clown on the cover, and everybody's like, what's that one all about? You know, they read the description or whatever, and they're like, okay, I'll give it a chance. And the people that did give it a chance, 3 out of 5 of those people were like, I gotta tell somebody about this fucking movie. This is something different. The other 2 just went and cried or puked or, went to church or something like that. But for the people that liked it, they talked about it. They told other people, and this word of mouth started to grow, and suddenly Terrifier, the original Terrifier, was finding an audience on Netflix and gaining a lot of buzz and steam, to the point where it started to pop up in horror culture. People were starting to talk about it. People were reviewing it. This was showing up in people's podcasts and YouTubes, and critics were diving into it, and it was really starting to gain steam. And it was left wide open. And this wasn't the original Terrifier was completely independent, funded privately through, Damien Leone had somebody that wasn't even in the movie business, that just wanted to get in the movie business, agreed to fund the film with no promise that it was ever going to generate a dime for him. And through the whole process, Terrifier became a success. Maybe not financially, it might have been, I don't know for sure, but it had that word of mouth buzz to it. And now it had been a couple years, several years since that film came out, and it found a fandom to the point where people were starting to get tattoos about it and everything. Everybody was already saying he's the next horror icon, and then everybody else was like, well, slow your roll, hold on now, let's just wait on that for a minute. And with Terrifier 2's release, same thing. It started in a couple theaters. Instead of Netflix, it's happening in the theaters now through the month of October. It was only supposed to be there 3 days, only supposed to be in select theaters. And then it got more theaters, and then it got more dates, and it just, all of a sudden you hear people starting to talk. I was there for the first 3 days because it was only advertised as it's only going to be here for 3 days. And to be fair, I didn't look in the city I went to if it, did get extra dates there or not. But I know in general, it continued to get extra dates at these theaters. And I started to hear people talk about it, right? Like, there were already the diehard horror fans. The horror community was already kind of up on it. But now, as the weeks unfold and this movie starts to make millions now, it's up to it's past 8 million. I want to say it's probably close to 10 by now, which doesn't sound like a lot compared to any other mainstream movie that you see or hear about. But this isn't a mainstream movie. This is an independent film with no big studios at all. There's no cuts in this movie. Well, there's lots of cuts, but this movie is like a full 2 hours plus. And it's, the murder, the brutality, the violence, the gore goes on and on and on and drags out, and they show you every graphic detail of it to the point where you're squirmish, and that there's reports of people running out of the theater and puking and stuff. In the theater that I was in, it was maybe a fifth full. It wasn't that packed. But there was one lady in particular who was shrieking, oh Lord, oh Lord. She kept doing that and stuff. It was fantastic. It was so good. Just the fact that you get to see a movie independent like that with no rating, no big studio, in a movie theater with that kind of violence and gore, and you almost feel like you're watching something that you're not supposed to, and you're like, does this movie theater know what this is here? It's not Halloween. This is something very violent, and they used the extra money that they got from the crowdfunding to really invest it back into and make a bigger, grander movie, because they got way more money than they were asking for. And they did. They put every last bit of it into this movie. Again, an independent. And now Damien Leone had said that he was getting offers for the second Terrifier movie already from a bigger studio, at least one. And he turned it down because they, with that comes the dick in the ass, right? With that comes, we're going to have to make some changes to adapt to a modern mainstream audience. And that's not Terrifier. That's not what this movie is. And this is why I love it so much. Now, was the film the best film ever? No, it was highly entertaining, but it wasn't like the greatest thing of all time. There's flaws in it. But why I love it so much is because Damien Leone didn't sell this out. He has a love and a passion for this movie, for this character. The actor, David Howard Thornton, who plays Art the Clown, has a passion for this. These people want to continue to make these movies. Leone has said he's at least got a third, if not a fourth in him. Then he said at that point, we'll see, because he doesn't want to play it out either. He's expressed aspirations of taking on a zombie film. I could see him finishing the Terrifier franchise and then moving into the zombie genre. Like, the fact that he's going 100% independent, that he's turning down big studios, it's not about the money. The money will come. He's making the money. They're getting licensing deals. They got a Trick or Treat Studios license. They got, and this movie is going to give them so much more, because this movie has already done so much more than the original Terrifier did, and it's crossed over and broken into mainstream audiences the way that the original Terrifier didn't. Now this thing's being talked about. This is popular. This is getting a lot of attention, and it reminds me of the story of that John Carpenter tells about Halloween, where its first whatever weekend in the theaters or whatever, that it didn't do that high, and it was even getting some bad reviews, I guess, and then like word of mouth started to pick up, and then it just got more and more over time. More people started to go check this out, started to make more money, and then became a giant success at its time. Terrifier, not on as big of a scale as Halloween was at that time, but Terrifier, I think, has now crossed over into the mainstream. There are enough people talking about this, and it's all that word of mouth. It's all that, you gotta see this shit, bro. This is crazy. Oh my God, have you heard about this movie? Like, when you have that kind of word of mouth, you're doing something right. And then David Howard Thornton and Damien Leone they know that this movie, like, they know what's special about this. They know what the fans love about this, and they're not going to sacrifice that or sell that out. They're not going to sell it to a major studio, at least not now. They're not going to dilute the character or water anything down to get, this movie especially has shown that they can hang in the theaters. So now, there's going to be more pressure for the third one to be in more theaters and to do, become a bigger success. And, with that, there might come pressure to water it down, or maybe it needs to get rated. This one kind of slid under the radar in a lot of ways. Damien Leone said he never even submitted it to the ratings board. Just, how are you in theaters all over the country and you haven't even submitted your movie to the ratings board? He completely ducked the system 100%. He ducked the major studios. He ducked the MPA. He ducked every logical, reasonable, anything that any path that every other movie has ever followed. And it's such in the way of the 80s classic slashers. It's a throwback to that in a lot of ways, but it's also like in spirit, not just in the way that it was filmed and that art is a slasher and all that, but in spirit, just the independent nature of it, like low budget, like by your bootstraps, practical effects, like everything about this. There's an actress in this film, Lauren Lavera. She's going to be a mega star. She's not going to be like, she's on the Jamie Lee Curtis path of like, oh, I started my career in this little indie low budget horror movie, and she's going to be like in fucking Marvel movies or Star Wars or some shit. Like, she's a mega star waiting to happen. I'm telling you, she's the best final girl we've had in horror in years and years and years. Probably the best final girl since Scream, right? Since Neve Campbell. I don't think anybody's done it better. There's just so much to love about this movie. And like, yes, you can go in and you can pick apart the flaws. It's too long, it's too gory, it's too self-indulgent, the audio levels, you know what I mean? Like, find any little thing that you want to hang on to say meh, the stories and that's fine. Those are all fair criticisms to make. I'm not saying those aren't valid, but what I'm saying is, besides the fact, this movie is a special movie. This movie is paving ground that movies these days just don't pave. If they do, they're straight to video or streaming. They are not the mega success that this is turning out to be. He's already, like, the movie's already made. It was made for 250,000 and it made 8 million plus. So it's already a financial success, and it's not a big studio release. It's not a big cast. It's not a big production crew. So that 8 million doesn't need to get split 8 million different ways either. It's a very successful film, and there will be a third, and there will probably be a fourth, and Art the Clown is here to stay. And I just wanted to take the time, I'm not going to go in and review the film or anything like that, but I just wanted to take the time to kind of gush and write my love letter, so to speak, to Terrifier, for what it's been able to accomplish and what it is and what it represents. I am not sitting here saying it's the best horror movie ever. It's one of the best this year. I'd say Barbarian was probably better than it. It was certainly better than Halloween. And the Terrifier franchise is becoming a good little franchise. But besides the film quality, which I love, I love the film. I love everything about it personally. But I do see the critiques and I understand them. But above all of that, this movie is special for what it represents and what it's accomplished and what it will continue to accomplish. And I just wanted to take that time to really put that out there, to express how special this movie is, how grateful I am to have it, to live in this era. And think about, like, what I just said about the year that this year has had in horror. Halloween, Smile, Barbarian. Horror is back in such a big way, and I'm fucking tickled to death that there's a movie out there like Terrifier that gives no fucks, holds nothing back, pulls no punches, is out there to just be as intense as humanly possible without just turning everybody off. The only line is drawn is to just not send the entire audience out puking and make it unwatchable, right? But other than that, it goes there. It's not afraid to go there. Matter of fact, it wears that on its sleeve. It has broken a brand new actress into this world that I think is going places, big places, and it's created a horror icon. And they've done it all without having to sell out, without having to sacrifice, without having to, water anything down, change anything, bend the knee to anybody. And fucking just out there, just pirates of the movie business, just rebels, just out there fucking on their own lane, just flying under everybody's radar, going around the industry to get to the same spot. This movie is sitting in the same theater as Halloween Ends this year at the same time, and just they're both horror films, and there could not be two different movies. The studio, the giant studio production, the indie bootstraps production. It's just it's a wonder of modern filmmaking, but budget, special effects, the fact that it's in theaters, and the fact that this has got to be the only movie in my lifetime, or at least one where I'm old enough to remember, be a film fan, that has just completely built itself off of word of mouth. Maybe Donnie Darko would be another one, even though that was a studio release. It was kind of buried because it came out around 9/11 and it had the plane engine falling and that kind of shit, teen suicide, that kind of, so they buried it basically, and yet the little movie that could dug its way up to become iconic. So Cream can and does rise to the top. What else can be said about this? Like I said, wanted this to be just my little gush session for Terrifier, and to appreciate Terrifier for all it is. David Howard Thornton, Damien Leone, you made a fucking modern day horror masterpiece. I salute you, sirs. And that was For the Love of Terrifier. Peace, love, and pizza. I am your boy, Seth Grimes, and we'll catch you in the next video.